We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Welcome into Tailgate. Austin Gayle here with Mike Renner in sunny Indianapolis live. How was your night last night? We stayed out till like 2. It was kind of a brutal scene, honestly.
I like how you asked how my night was and then just like described.
I mean, how was your night? We didn't hang out the entire time.
We didn't hang out the entire time. It was a good night.
It was a good night?
Yeah,
any highlights?
Combine. Let's see. Highlights. Talked to Shrine Bowl director Eric Calico, friend of the pod. That was a good conversation we had.
Nice. I was talking to some guys with the Atlanta Falcons, talking to some guys with the Ravens, got some interesting stuff. I'm excited to disclose all that stuff. I can't because they gave me some information. I can't really share. We'll see. We will see. On the show today, we got Seth Galena on the Too High podcast. You can check out his podcast on the PFF Podcast Network. He's in Indianapolis as well. Got in late yesterday, hung out with him a bit. He joins the show at the back half here. But to start, all mailbag, baby. Let's get into the mailbag. Excuse me. All right, here we go. First question. It's from Mendoza QM on Apple Podcasts. Mike, what TV show quote would you get tattooed? Okay, because I have the tattoo. You were screaming.
Should we say yours first?
You were screaming at Eric Galco last night.
Yeah.
Stephen Ruiz last night. This guy's the biggest Office fan. He has the tattoo on his leg. I do have the tattoo on my leg. It says, well, actually, I can't cook, and I am starting a restaurant. After that, it says Mike's Cereal Shack. It's a deep cut from The Office. It's on my thigh. I'll show it on the pod again one of these days. What would you get on your leg or your neck?
Okay, so if I had to, I'm not going to, obviously. But if I had to.
Don't say obviously like that.
I'm not Austin Gayle. No, it would be from Friday Night Lights. A lot of good quotes to pick from that movie. Obviously, I'm a big fan of that. I named my dog after Tim Riggins. His name is Riggins. I grew my hair out when me and my brother were watching the show. He started growing our hair out.
Really? That's really? I didn't know that.
So, I would Texas Forever, maybe. That's a good one.
Incredible. That's good.
Even though, like, I've never lived in Texas. Big fan of Texas. I'm an admirer. I admire Texas from afar. So Texas Forever.
There you go. I don't know if I get another quote on me. At this point, I've been ridiculed by everyone in Indianapolis. Bears Blog Boys on Apple Podcasts.
Just get the whole episode down the
my back.
Yeah.
A full episode on my back would actually go pretty hard. I think, Bears Blog Baby on Apple Podcasts. I thought your take on trading Robert Quinn or Khalil Mack was interesting. I like trading Roquan since it saves more money and probably net a first. What do you think? There's no way. Would someone trade a first for Roquan Smith?
So this is his fifth. He's on the fifth-year option, right? I believe. I don't think anyone's trading a first for a linebacker who's just could be
with
there
an
for
expiring
1
contract.
year. Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that's the case. But also, like, Roquan Smith and Matt Eberflus defense is a dream. Like, that is what you want. You look at what he did in Indy and how much Darius Leonard meant to that defense because of just the way it's schematically played, like a lot of cover two, he's asked to cover a lot of ground over the middle of the field. Roquan Smith's that guy. Like, I think he's going to be a perfect fit. I think he's going to have a career year in this defense. And so when I talk about, trading Robert Quinn, trading Khalil Mack, it's because those guys aren't building blocks for what is a championship roster, hoping to be a championship roster 2 or 3 years down the line. Because let's be real, it's not a championship roster right now. So that's 2 or 3 years down the line. Those guys are going to be either costing too much or on the downslide to where if you can get something back in return from them, what you get in return can be more than what they're giving you on that contract. So for Roquan Smith, though, he's that piece to a championship team. You're hoping to, signing him an extension, whatever. Like, he is a guy who could be a cornerstone for years to come. So I don't think trading him is where I would go. And like I said, I do think he's perfect for that defense.
I think when we were having the conversation around trading Quinn or trading Mack too, it's like if they can find way to keep them both, right? It's the cap situation that they're in, right? You want Quinn and Mack on your football team. It's not because they're bad football players. It's more because...
Yeah, it's like if they had a well-managed cap up to this point and they had $40 million in space or whatever and a lot to play with and a good roster, you're keeping Mack and Quinn. Like, you're definitely keeping those guys. But it's because of what they've done in years prior.
All right, this is from Bear May 3 on Apple Podcasts. I've been fascinated by doubling up on positions of need. I thought the Raiders should have doubled up on receiver in 2019. The Eagles are in a prime position this year. Get two at 15, 16, and 19. What do you think? Do they go? What do they double up on if they're the Eagles in this first round?
My take on this, not going to be everyone's take. You're going to double up anywhere. Cornerback. That's where I'm doubling up. Packers did it with Jair Alexander, Josh Jackson, and yeah, Josh Jackson didn't pan out, but you hit one of them and hit one of them big. The Bucs did it, not to the same degree when they got Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean, same draft. And those guys were cornerstones to a Super Bowl run. So to me, if you're going anywhere, cornerback in this draft where you can get feasibly Andrew Booth, Trent McDuffie, add to that cornerback group Darius Slay, that's hot to me.
Yeah.
That's a guy who Trent McDuffie could easily play the slot, even though he didn't at Washington. That is a guy whose skill set translates very well to the slot at the NFL. That's starting to, with that defensive line, be a defense that I'd be excited about.
I think going two defensive backs in the first round, specifically cornerback for Philly, is not one I've done a ton of, but I do like. But the other thing I like with Philly is at the top of the second round, getting after safety, because I think that's where it is the value of this safety class after Kyle Hamilton will be at the top of the second round. I think that's another position of need that they have. You fit in a Brisker with Booth and McDuffie. You really try and turn around that secondary for Philly. I mean, I do think a lot of people can talk themselves into that.
It is interesting that I really like the safety class, but I have not seen anyone besides Kyle Hamilton mocked in the first round. Just you don't see anyone, and I think that's wrong in my opinion.
Really?
I think these guys are good enough to warrant consideration when you get to the back of the first round, especially considering the class and the strengths of it, that I think in this day and age, safety's getting more valuable. So
I think we'll see some Brisker in first-round mocks after this week. I think he'll remind people that it's not just Kyle Hamilton in the safety class. I think Lewis Seen fell out of Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. He seems to be tumbling a bit. But Brisker is a guy that I think will firmly be in this top 40, top 50 type of player, and potentially even in the back end of the first round. From Nick_W12 on Apple Podcasts. Thoughts on Christian Watson, the North Dakota State receiver that Brett Coleman is consistently mocking inside the top 15 of his mock draft.
It's just
range of outcomes
number 12 only.
The range of outcomes for Christian Watson, if you ask the right people, could be first round all the way down to day 3.
I think like Holmes, like if he as long as he go 12, he's going 100. And it's like no, but we went through Watson when we talked about that and Brett Coleman's tweet, but I did find this tweet by Ben Fennell very insightful to why I gravitate away from guys like Christian Watson, who's 6'4", 211 pounds. At North Dakota State. Looks, physically dominant on tape at North Dakota State. Like he's mossing dudes, can jump high. He's probably going to test fairly well here at the Combine. But this tweet, Ben Fennell, 6'4", 6'5" wide receivers who are between 200 pounds and 215 pounds. There has only been one Pro Bowler the last 21 years in that range.
Really?
One, A.J. Green. The only one. And A.J. Green was like a stud since his freshman year at Georgia. And
did it against SEC competition.
Yes, top, got drafted ahead of Julio Jones, So it's just not a body type that is conducive to success being tall and skinny at wide receiver. Because one, it's tough to sink, and now Christian Watson, I think that's why people are high on Christian Watson, is because he can do that physically. He has that flexibility in his lower half to get off the line of scrimmage, to stop on his at the top of his routes and really get low in his cuts. But at the same time, it presents a big strike zone for cornerbacks. You think about you're going up against a 6-foot corner with 32-inch arms. They have the leverage battle on you that they can bully. They can move you if you're shoulder to shoulder with that guy and you're the same weight. 205-pound cornerback in the NFL, which a lot of the guys are 195 plus once you get to the league. That guy's pushing to the sideline. It's just very difficult to push back and really move the corner instead of the corner moving you when you are tall and skinny. So that's why I worry about it. And actually, the Fennell tweet was about Drake London, who I think is going to show up bigger than that, 215 pounds. I'd be surprised if he's listed 215 at USC, but I think he's going to be
220.
Yeah, I think he'd be about 220 here.
This is from Jedfire on Apple Podcasts. Why is Jameson Williams a better fit for the Browns than Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave? I'm not sure which one of us thought Jameson Williams was a better fit for the Browns. I think Baker needs good route runners and who can consistently get open. I think it's the speed aspect. I feel why I would, between those three, maybe gravitate towards Jameson Williams. Mm-hmm. And would it not be for injury? Now, if the ACL involved, I'd probably lean Garrett Wilson for them. But speed plays immediately, and they drafted Anthony Schwartz to kind of alleviate that. But even
one Anthony Schwartz, who's to me still a gadget player, ain't fixing your speed issues at wide receiver. Like they couldn't go deep last year after they traded Odell Beckham. They had no one who was getting open at that level of the football field. I know we said Olave can very much and is NFL ready, but like Williams is a different animal speed-wise.
I also think that receiving core in Cleveland is very young, and while all of us are consistently mocking receiver at 13, like I would not be surprised if not. I'd highly encourage the Cleveland Browns to also add veteran talent there, because Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz, Jarvis Landry, I think maybe he's on his way out of Cleveland. Like I do think that you need to add veteran talent there, in my opinion. And this receiver class in free agency is actually really good. Like even beyond Chris Godwin, there are some guys you can pick up that can like come in and immediately start to create separation for Baker Mayfield, which obviously this offense desperately needs.
Yeah, they'd be a good fit for someone like Allen Robinson. And now he's not necessarily the vertical threat, and you still need that. Will Fuller or MVS are probably like your two speed dudes in free agency, but I think they also need like a true one. So they need a lot.
No,
so that's kind of what I was getting at there.
But I mean, even like a Michael Gallup, right? You bring Michael Gallup into that offense. I mean, they just need. I do think that they just don't want to be a completely.
Every guy who's torn his ACL last year.
I just want only guys in the Cleveland Browns uniform that have torn an ACL. That would be great. Before we start moving forward through this podcast here, gotta remember that this is the presenting sponsor of this podcast is actually Manscaped. Can I get a round of applause, everyone? Everyone here in Indy. Today, I'm excited to announce Manscaped launched their ultra premium collection, excuse me. Believe it or not, it's not just for your private parts. I'm talking about leveled up hygiene routine with your favorite manly scent. This is an all-in-one skin and hair kit for the everyday man and covers you from head to toe, literally. Manscaped is trusted below the waist. Now trust them with the rest. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF. This is one of the more tame Manscaped reads now that they are expanding to every inch of your body, which you can only dream of. Hop in the shower and scrub it up, that body with Manscaped Body Wash. Lather your hair up with the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner to keep your noggin togging. I don't even know what that means. If your noggin's not togging, though, in 2022, you're not getting a lot of ladies, I'll say that. Dry off and spray on the hydrating body moisturizer to reinvigorate your dry skin. Put on the Manscaped deodorant for obvious reasons. Obvious reasons, Mike. Pop that Manscaped lip balm on. No one is out here kissing chapped up lips. Getting dressed after is optional. Wear one great scent all day long. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. The power of attraction is now in a bottle thanks to Manscaped. I think what Manscaped needs to lean into next, honestly, because you're not bringing up, there's cologne, right? There's this like added scent that when you're going on dates that people are attracted, you're not bringing up like, hey, I'm head to toe Manscaped. That's honestly like kind of intimidating. You're not going to flex that necessarily.
Yeah. It's kind of a unsaid thing. You don't really want to be going out.
Women would rather assume you're doing it than know you're doing it.
It's a show, not tell. Sort of thing.
I agree with that. On to next question here. This is from Todd is a Boy, who literally I think asks the question every single week.
Love it.
He's a diehard Tailgate podcast fan. Who has a better situation? He's a Gator.
You not just say Tailgate podcast.
I know, that was ridiculous. He's a Gator. Todd is a Boy. He's a Gator. Todd is a Gator. Who has a better situation going forward? Jaguars or Jets? Jaguars. Has to be. Better quarterback. I feel better about their cap situation. The coaching staff, obviously, I like Robert Saleh a lot. I do think that Doug Peterson's no slouch, though. I like the Jaguar situation a lot more.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to if you flip the quarterbacks, I'd flip my answer. But I feel that much more strongly about Trevor Lawrence being good than I do about Zach Wilson being good. That's what it comes down to. Now, take those guys out of the equation, we can have a conversation. And I think it actually leans Jets then at that point in terms of that conversation. I would feel more strongly about that's a better roster. That roster's going places and has a better situation. But, QB still. Still a QB-driven league.
It's from Tyler Fritz on Apple Podcasts. Rank the QB needy teams by who's the most desirable trade partners and most desirable destinations. Go ahead.
Okay. QB needy teams. I'll name them off, and then if I missed one, I missed one. The number one is Pittsburgh. Good receiving core, young receiving core, and they made the playoffs. This was a good team already with a bad quarterback. So your upside is high if you come in and ball out. So I think you got a good receiving core that has a number of different types of wide receivers. Now, the sort of thing dragging them down and why it's a conversation still, Matt Canada. You got an OC that might not let you throw the ball down the field. So that you wish you didn't necessarily were walking into as a quarterback, but nonetheless, they're still number one. Number two, Denver. Good receiving core, good roster, offensive-driven head coach, Nathaniel Hackett, who I like as a play caller and offensive mind. That I think that is a quick path to success that you can see. New Orleans at number 3, for obvious reasons. Now, no Sean Payton, no really receiving core, but again, a good roster. Almost made the playoffs last year.
Need Michael Thomas back. Need him.
Washington comes in at number 4 for me. The Commanders, solid-ish wide receiving core there. You have more than enough weapons, good enough offensive line, and pieces are there. If you come in, the only thing I worry about is offensive play calling. Indy comes in at number 5. Maybe they're not necessarily GB needy, but that's where they are. Then the Giants, obvious reasons here, but I do like the Dable sort of factor, and I think this wide receiving core could look a lot better with a better quarterback. So maybe they should have been higher. They could be higher here very shortly with a good offseason. Carolina comes in after them. Just bad O-line, needs to be fixed. Receiving core is not bad, but like you got Matt Rule trying to run the ball 30 times a game. Not a scenario you really want to be in as a QB. And then dead last is everyone's dead last. It's the Houston Texans.
I've had this. I think I mentioned it on the PFF at the Combine show that we're doing every day this week. But Carolina, and as you outlined, one of the worst situations if you're going to be a new quarterback. That's why when some of the mock drafts you have them taking a quarterback at 6, especially the quarterbacks in this class. I just do think that quarterback, if it's inserted immediately into that offense and has to play right away, is not necessarily destined to fail, but it's just going to be so much more difficult to develop in that offense versus getting an opportunity to sit behind a guy or whatever it may be. So I am worried at the idea of like a Malik Willis or these guys that have to be so much better in 2 or 3 years just getting thrown into like the literal fire that is the Carolina Panthers organization and offense, etc. But we'll see how it goes. All right, from Ethan Waugh on Apple Podcasts. Can you break down your scouting process on a player from what you look for on tape to putting together the big board? Who's the messier roommate? So there's a 2-part question.
That is a 2-part
question. I think so far we've split the house enough to where I don't know if we've been able to determine a messy roommate. And also, you also were gone in Florida.
Yeah. But
so
I'm
far,
say
no dishes left in the sink.
Yeah.
Maybe it is me.
It's probably, if you factor in my dog, it's probably me.
Yeah.
Because that is my dog's fucking disgusting.
And he smells like death.
You got to use
dog.
You got to use the breath spray in his bowl. You probably weren't using the breath spray in his bowl.
You didn't tell me how to use breath spray in his bowl.
You see me spray the bowl every time I fill it up with
water. And I wish the
water.
worst thing that smelled about him was his breath. It's just like legitimate fur. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to be around him.
Yeah.
Messi's roommate's Riggins.
That's actually.
Honestly, Riggins.
We screwed that one up. All right. So scouting process though, this one's so broad.
I mean, you could
so
have an hour.
Position
specific.
specific.
Be an hour long
yes, it could be. But I'll just say, the process that I go through is to identify what a guy's capable of and how he fares in the avenues at each position that I feel like translate to the NFL. So I think we've talked about this before, but like wide receiver separation ability, and then what he's capable of. After the catch, hands, or like a lot of that stuff's icing on the cake. But like, can he get open? Offensive tackle, like movement skills and size. Like, can the guy mirror a Von Miller at the NFL level? Is that something he's capable of? If it's not, we're not. It's a non-starter. So like, I think identifying the areas that translate, and then what a guy is capable of. What is his high end? Because that's what you can. We were talking about with Seth. Like, every coach thinks they can get that high end.
Yeah.
Every coach thinks they can get a guy to do the high end every single time, and now it's not always the case, and that's why scouting process is so fun. If you knew that was always the case, no one would give a shit about the draft. So I think that's kind of the scouting process and like what I go into watching a prospect thinking about.
I do think that Bucky Brooks has been on this podcast and has mentioned before that like so much of the scouting process is telling the decision makers what a player can do in the NFL.
Capable.
Not so much what he can't do and whatever. It's like, what can this player do and what could he be?
Yeah.
Because so much of it is a projection, and like that's literally all you're trying to do. It's not when you should take him and all that stuff. Just tell me what he can do, and then I'll make the decisions off of that.
Yeah, because like I have the buzzkill tweet every year that says just how many rookies ended up being good. Mm-hmm. It's far fewer than everyone thinks right now.
I mean, you come out of the combine, and you're like, there's 150 players in this class I'd like to have on my team.
Right?
Like you come out of it, and you're like, all these guys are going to be good.
Yes.
Perfectly Minty on Twitter. Thoughts on Marcus Jones, the Houston corner, who also proudly discusses every time I talk to him his kick returning ability. He's one of the better kick returners in this class.
He's not one of the better. The dude's the best kick returner in this class. Sadly, not a coveted skill as much anymore. But like, as far as just return skills, he's like a tier 1 returner in the NFL, most likely once he gets to the league. He's that good at that. a hashtag fun to watch player. Undersized, though. I believe he's 5'9", 175, 180. Like, that is slot corner only-ish. And, like, I've even gone away from really tagging those smaller dudes slot corners because slot corners turning into, like, glorified safety. Like, you want a guy that can tackle there. You want a guy that can drop into the box and almost play linebacker there. Mm-hmm. And so the smaller guys are just kind of SOL. Like, you just got to get bigger nowadays. Like, the amount of guys who are really at that size playing anywhere on defense in the NFL is so limited. And like I said, I think I'm gravitating away from those guys as even being slot options that I think maybe with the proliferation of, like I said, the too high, Fangio, whatever stuff around the NFL where you're a lot of off coverage and where the outside corner, like maybe he can exist as an outside corner in one of those schemes. Like a Darius Williams from the Los Angeles Rams, because his click and close is so quick, so instinctive, and like he's competes, is that guy that if he was 6 foot, 200 pounds, he'd be a top 10 pick sort of guy. Like but he's still behind the 8 ball in that regard. But you're still coveting him for his return ability, which is fun to watch.
Getting to some of the questions now on Twitter. This is from, I believe, Zach DiCarismo on Twitter. He said, Russ W. What makes Drake London a better prospect than Treylon Burks?
Ooh, we actually kind of get into this with
Seth a little bit.
And that I think with Drake London, you just like watching his tape, he looks like a basketball player. And I keep going back to that. And I think it's so important because, getting off the line of scrimmage is getting past the guy on a basketball court and driving to the hole. Like, that's literally what it is. You'd have to make get a guy out of position, and then go past him. And to me, you see it with Drake London consistently being able to do that. Number of releases, whatnot. And with the slot in 2020, this year played primarily, was outside, I believe 90+% of his snaps. Like, he was an outside X receiver, getting 10+ targets a game, winning. And not always winning, but like, even when he didn't win, he won at the catch point. With Treylon Burks, you just don't feel as confident in that part of his game. Now, there's a lot to like. His acceleration for a guy that size is stupid good. And I think his physicality is still going to play at the next level. Like, he is that level of explosiveness in a 225+ pounder that he has ways to win, but you just don't see, like, when he's breaking tackles, it's a stiff arm.
Yeah.
And like a guy bounces off his legs. When Drake London breaks tackles, it's like spin move. Like shimmy shake. He's got like a number of ways to do stuff.
Shimmy shake.
So that's kind of the difference, in my opinion. You skipped some of these questions.
I did skip a lot of questions, so I'm kind of picking and choosing which ones I like.
The top ones are good.
Okay, fine. Maybe I will dive into the top ones. It's my choice. I will say, too, we were talking a little bit about this, Seth, too. We're previewing a really good interview with Seth at the back end of this show. But
gonna want to save for that.
It's how you win and where you're winning, right?
Yes.
With Treylon Burks, such a high percentage of his production is on scheme stuff and stuff near the line of scrimmage, where Drake London is consistently winning at the intermediate and deep levels of the field. That is more valuable in the NFL, and that more translatable. Another question I got on here, which isn't in your questions that you think are good, but I'm interested in your answer. From Gus Johnson on Twitter, what traits do you personally overvalue in prospects? I think I would start with overvaluing highlight-level plays, highlight-level production against bad competition. I do that a lot.
Okay.
When you see something insane and you see a guy with a crazy release or beating a guy off the edge, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what this guy can do in the NFL, and then you find out that the person he's going against is now not in the NFL. Like, we're going to the USFL or wherever it is. I do think that you can get caught up in players performing really well or doing things that you want to see in the NFL just against guys that legitimately won't play in the NFL. That's why the Senior Bowl is really valuable. Mm-hmm. Like, you can go back and watch the player's tape, and I think some of this with the Sky Moore stuff, right? You watch Sky Moore and he's like the shiftiness and all that stuff, but there are times where it's like, okay, that cornerback sucks.
Yep.
Like, legitimately sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks relative to the NFL. So I do think I overvalue that.
You could beat him. You could get free release.
With Seth, too, and I think if I had to speak what Seth's answer would be, I think Seth would say, like, what he can do right now. You can sometimes overvalue what can he do right now. And I think he did that a little bit with Justin Herbert. You're doing that a little bit with Charles Cross. And you care so much more about, like, what can he do tomorrow and less what he can do in 2 years. Because when you look at how these guys are actually drafted, they're drafted based on what they can do in 2 or 3 years, not not what they can do right now.
I think I overvalue, on the defensive side of the ball, instinctive plays. Yeah, I see an instinctive play, and I'm like, oh, that's sick. This guy's good instinct. You know, like, see
those are fun to watch, though.
They are. And it's like, oh, he jumped a route. Oh, like, and like a guy who can consistently do those, I think I overvalue because a lot of times, one, instinctive plays at the NFL level are not the norm. The offenses are like the guys who really get by on that, who have that level. You know, the Luke Kuechly's of the world are an anomaly. It's just not quite as, it's just not as valuable because, like, you know, schemes are more complex, formations are more complex. You don't see stuff on tape a lot of times that you then can like
obvious
immediately,
tells,
yes,
yeah.
exactly, immediately put into action at the NFL level. So like that's far more common in college where playbooks are way thinner and teams will run the same play like 10 times a game. So to me, that's one of the biggest things where it's like I see those plays and I get excited because like I like to think of myself as instinctive, you know, athlete back in the day, and that's how I won to a degree.
You were not an instinctive
I was an
athlete
instinctive
back in the
basketball
day.
player. Okay, you don't even know. You go watch my tape. And that's like that's something that I probably overvalue. Yeah.
This is from Justin on Twitter. Is this one of the questions you think is good? Steve said Renner got fired and brought back. What happened?
I can't believe
I've heard
Steve
this
brought
story
that up.
before, but how much can you even tell of this story?
I'm going to tell the whole thing.
All right, tell the whole thing.
So Neil, okay, I guess I won't tell the whole thing.
You can't tell the whole thing. I know
okay,
that.
but I basically, this was 2016, possibly. I believe 2016 or 2017, one of those years. And it was like in the spring. It was not during football season, so I was not doing much. But there was a miscommunication between Neil Hornsby and my like direct manager, whose name's Khaled El Said, who runs our data collection side of the business, basically, about what I was supposed to be doing. And I was listening to Khaled because he was my direct manager at the time. And basically, the upshot of it was I didn't do what Neil thought I was supposed to be doing. And I got on the phone with him, and I was
in the airport, right?
I was in the airport I had asked him if I could work from home that day. And my work from home was me driving to the airport at noon and going on a flight to Las Vegas for the weekend. And Neil fired me. He's like, if you don't get back in the office, you're fired.
Really? And you were in CVG,
and I'm at the airport. Literally, they're boarding the plane as I'm talking to him on the phone. He's like, you're not back in the office. I didn't tell him. I said I was whatever. I don't know what I said. I was like, if you don't get back in the office and do this now, you're fired. And I'm like, well,
I guess I just got fired.
I'm getting up.
How'd you go into, so I've never heard the part of like when you get to Vegas. So did you light it up or like what was the
I had a great
like?
weekend. I mean, I'm not going to let that ruin my Vegas trip. But no, I ended up like sending an email. I asked Jeff Dooley, who was the managing editor at the time. I was like, dude, what do I do?
Dooley, good guy, by the way. Also
great dude.
Works at the Washington Post now.
Washington Post now. He's like, what do I do? He's like, you probably like, he's like, reach out to HR and say what happened. Like, give your side of the story. Yeah. So that's what I did. I crafted an email to HR, had a meeting on Monday, got my job back, and the upshot of it was I didn't have to go in the office anymore. So I got my job back and didn't have to go in the office anymore.
You cheated your way into every opportunity. These emails to HR, such a privileged little fucking piece of shit. All right, this is from Greaser on Twitter, which is a great name on Twitter. Greaser said, in Renner's farthest throws tweet, Ritter and Zappi were the only quarterbacks, so Ritter of Cincinnati, Bailey Zappi of Western Kentucky, were the only ones to not cross their feet in the drop back. Is that good or bad? Does that mean anything?
Yeah, I mean, you get a little more juice on a little crow hop, but not too much. Like, it's minimal with that, throwing a football with that, like a cross step like that. So, yeah, like when the guy really rips it from a stationary base, more impressive, but only slightly. Here's how I would kind of rank the arm strengths of this class. Guy, like, pure ability to rip it. Number one, Malik Willis. I think that's obviously that's a given at this point. Number two is tough, though, because I think the interesting thing about this class, a lot of these guys have strong arms. Like, you have to get down to, like, I'm not sure any of the top guys. I think we'll get to it, but like I think of all the top guys, only one has a arm that's going to be average by NFL standards when he gets there. Maybe two. So Malik Willis one. I'd go Sam Howell too. Now I know that maybe people are going to disagree, but I do think that when he really lets it go, and he can do it on the move too, he can put some juice on it. Like, he had a Hail Mary. The throw in that was like a 68-yard through the air Hail Mary. So like he put air under a damn near 70-yard throw. So he's 2. Carson Strong from Nevada 3. Matt Corral 4. Desmond Ridder 5, Bailey Zappi 6, and then Kenny Pickett's the only guy who I'd say, like, by NFL standards, probably an average arm, but even he's not questions about his arm strength.
Yeah.
No one's like, oh, the Joe Burrow questions, this ain't a Ryan Finley situation. These guys have arms.
Ryan Finley, San Diego State legend, I believe?
NC State.
NC State. No, who am I thinking of?
Lindley.
Ryan
Lindley. There you go.
A couple other questions here, and then we'll jump to the Seth Galena interview. A couple of fun ones towards the back end. You get to choose your broadcasting teams from the 6 characters listed below. You can randomize any 2, but you have to select your Thursday night, your Sunday night, and your Monday night crew from these 6. Also, make Thursday Night Football more interesting. Cursing is allowed to drive viewership. It's Rob Gronkowski, Pat McAfee, Marshawn Lynch, Ray Lewis, T.O., Phillip Rivers. This is interesting. Okay. I do think that the pairing matters. I'm going to say you want Marshawn Lynch with I don't know which broadcast he's going on yet. Marshawn Lynch with either McAfee or Rivers, because Lynch is a color commentator 100%, and you need a guy that can actually chirp to be the play-by-play. I think Rivers and Lynch would be the comparison, and I'd honestly like that on Monday night. I'm going to go Lynch and Rivers on Monday night.
I think you need Rivers in there because you need someone who's going to see the whole game.
Yeah.
So I think Rivers, and then I'd lean T.O.'s just not interesting at all on the mic. No. T.O.'s not getting anywhere near this.
And honestly, I'd bury like Ray Lewis and T.O. together and just call Sunday night a wash. You're just going to lose Sunday night, which is like not an ideal broadcasting crew. And Ray Lewis will have some funny quotes.
I think Rivers and Ray Lewis could be an interesting combo. That's a combo I'd gravitate towards because the dichotomy of vastly different dudes. And Ray Lewis brings some energy to him that I like. That.
No,
like
the energy from
dudes.
Ray would be good. Yeah. I think for Thursday night with the swearing included, Gronk and McAfee is the combo. Gronk and McAfee would be great. Yeah. McAfee play-by-play, Gronk on the color. I think that would be the move I would do. Second question from Garrett Penchey on Twitter, by the way. Rank the bottom 3 in order of Super Bowl food preferences. The Taco Bell 12-pack, the bundle box from McDonald's, which I don't know what's in the bundle box from McDonald's.
Let me look up that bundle box.
You're looking up the bundle box? What is and then the KFC chicken fill-up, which I'm sure is just a bucket of chicken.
The bundle box is 2 Big Macs, 2 cheeseburgers, and a 10-piece McNuggets and 4 small fries. Only $10.
That's dead last for me. I'm going KFC chicken fill-up, Taco Bell 12-pack, and then the bundle box. Because you can't split the bundle box. So me and you just each have a Big Mac together. What if you got a party like 3 or 4?
I'd go Taco Bell 12-pack, 1. Bundle box 2. Chicken fill-up 3.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it because you don't like KFC?
I don't like KFC.
Yeah. KFC does stink.
I really cannot believe we're obviously not getting a KFC sponsor anytime soon. But it's like your entire thing is chicken, and there's probably a half dozen restaurants that are fast food restaurants that do chicken better than them that are not chicken restaurants.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather have a Burger King chicken sandwich than anything that comes out
That's fair, actually. It's a really good
and
take.
it comes out of KFC, which is insane to me. Like, if your name is KFC, that
Kentucky
chicken better be
Fried
fucking hot. Like, Popeyes is the... Like, if you're do chicken, it better be like Popeyes, where Popeyes is solid all around. So, blows my mind.
This question's interesting from Mike Malik on Twitter. What if the NFL instituted the Madden Award, given to the most outstanding player? I love that. So we could stop having the conversation about, like, who's the most valuable, and then, like, we have to give Offensive Player of the Year to a player that isn't a quarterback, so we're making up for the most valuable player being always a quarterback.
I am so tired of that. So, some person mentioning Jonathan Taylor as MVP, and then every analytics account in existence dunking on him, being like, do you know what value means?
Yeah, it's over. I think that conversation's done.
I have no interest in ever taking part in that conversation ever again. So please, keep the MVP. Add another award.
The Madden Award.
On par with the MVP.
Like the Heisman. I like the Madden. That's
Yeah.
cool. I like that. I think that's a great call by Matt Malik.
Let's start a campaign for that so I can stop having the other conversation.
I'm interested, you saying that, what would your first move be in starting any campaign? I just don't see that effort from
telling someone else to do
it. I was about to say, I would start a campaign for the Madden Award. Like, what, you're going to send a fucking tweet? Like,
no, I wouldn't even do that.
Yeah, I don't think you would.
I would hopefully someone else does it.
Hugh Jackson Foundation level of energy in that campaign there. I just don't think that's going to happen.
That is the dream, though, is to get that Hugh Jackson Foundation CEO position where I just get $115,000 to do.
This is from, and we'll close with this one. And then we'll get to the Seth Galena interview. Remember, Seth Galena, host on the Too High podcast. Make sure you check out his show. This is from Skin on Twitter, or Sicken on Twitter. Steve recently mentioned the Bill Polian story and mentioned Mike. Can Mike dive into that story? Was that where you got
this one I don't
blocked on
know.
him? Didn't you get blocked by Bill Polian? Or no, was that someone else?
That was Greg. Oh, that was who's the old guy?
Gil Brandt.
Gil Brandt blocked me.
I kind of put them together.
Because Gil Brandt blocked me after I dunked on. I didn't really dunk on. It was actually a very accurate tweet. It was, you know, that NFL
Not surprised
100.
that you felt it was good.
That NFL 100 list that was like the biggest flop of all time.
Oh my God.
That like
they
just
literally
completely.
botched that.
It was had this massive hype up. You had Chris Collinsworth sitting down with Bill Belichick to discuss football, and it ended up being, sorry Chris, fucking
a disaster.
They all
ended
talked
up being
about
like a historian.
Yeah,
like the best running backs of all time. And all of them were like running backs in the 1920s.
Everyone's grandpa was tuning in, but like, dude, no one who's any new fan could give a fuck about.
I need to pull up some of the names on that.
Yeah.
Madden,
there was
all 100 team, or no, what was it called?
And so it was like
the
Gil
NFL.
Brandt tweets out that, you know, he was a decision. He was ultimately in the committee that decided on the list. And I just quote tweeted it, and I just said, "This makes a ton of sense." That's all I said, and then I got blocked because of it.
Dude, on the all 100 team, there was a guy on there for the running backs. That was Earl Dutch Clark. And, like, no hate towards Earl Dutch Clark.
Okay, you didn't watch Dutch tape?
Didn't watch Dutch tape. But this guy also, when you go back and look at, like, his Pro Football Reference numbers, he played quarterback. Like literally putting, like, different players at different positions in this bitch. Like, linebacker was, like, Bobby Bell. Like, who the fuck are these people? You should have done way more recency. And, like, the entire panel was people from, like, the 1920s. Yeah. I don't know. Not Chris from the 1920s.
It was
Chris is a little younger than that.
But I don't know the Bill Polian story, actually.
I've
never interacted with Bill Polian. I know that he hates Steve, though.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah. I don't know why, but
interesting.
So maybe.
I think Steve has told me it. They were doing like a meeting, and Bill Polian, like this is when PFF was still trying to sell to the NFL teams. Like it wasn't until I believe 2018 that PFF officially sold to all 32 teams. I think the last two teams to buy into PFF were Tampa Bay and Washington. And in that whatever time, they were in a meeting, and Bill Polian apparently was like just like confronting every move that Steve made with like this is trash. Like, and I think
he had a negative attitude towards analytics.
How about positive attitude towards analytics? The Denver Broncos were at the GM George Patton and Nathaniel Hacker are talking about technology and like adopting numbers and analytics, and then someone mentioned like, okay, like what technology are you guys leveraging? And he's like, we want our coaches using PowerPoint. And I was like, fuck.
No.
Yes, I swear. So dude, the Denver Broncos are like adapting to the times and really introducing technology, and they're like, yeah, instead of like writing things down, we're using PowerPoint, which is baby steps. I mean, you had who was the Falcons coach? Dean Pease. He was like, I still write down everything. And I was like, I don't know if that's the flex you were meaning it to be. You know, like, if you're writing things down in 2022, you're probably losing a lot of it.
Yeah, it is something that you're almost working at PFF, you take for granted people's competency in terms of like technology usage. And like you see these teams, and they're just like, I mean, like think of like your dad and how capable he is at using technology.
Whoa,
that's your average NFL head coach. Yeah,
my dad's technology usage is actually paramount. But let's get to this interview with Seth Galena. He joined the show in person one of the few times he's been on this podcast in person. The only other time was in the Senior Bowl, the first time we met him, and he said Justin Herbert can't play. So I don't know if he
so we're going to get him to say every quarterback in this class can't play.
Let's get to Seth. Now joining the show, PFF analyst Seth Galena, all the way from the neighbors of the North, Canada. Excited to have you in Indianapolis. This is your first Combine, isn't it?
Yeah, this is my first one. I'm really excited to be here and to hang out with you guys, really.
That's
what we're supposed to do.
You sound
here,
like it.
Yeah, you sound freaking absolutely enthralled. It's all sponsored also by Pink Drink at Starbucks. The first time I've ever seen Mike Renner order it, and is it good? It looks just like strawberry milk. Is it not just strawberry milk?
It's not healthy for sure. I think it's like a Starbucks refresher and coconut milk and strawberries, but it's delicious.
Any caffeine or anything?
What's the caffeine situation?
It's got caffeine, yeah. That's why I woke up this morning and I'm like, I need caffeine, obviously. But I'm also like, the coffee sounds like a grind to slug through. This is fantastic.
But it's not warm, and I don't know. I'm not like a big like ice drink guy like you guys. Ice caffeine, Jesus. But it's not that warm that you guys should be going with ice stuff. Like I gotta have a regular hot coffee this morning.
I don't think so.
Austin's a year-round ice guy.
I'm a year-round iced coffee guy.
Oh,
I'm not, but
what did I agree?
Let's get into this class, by the way, off of the Starbucks Pink Drink here. You, I think, have You were one of the first people that I remember coming out and saying Charles Cross is this top offensive tackle in the NFL draft, the Mississippi State offensive tackle that now is like some people's offensive tackle 3, offensive tackle 4. Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network has him behind Trevor Penning at this point. I thought the big 3, right, it was going to be Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, and Charles Cross as these guys that everyone's considering top 10, top 15 players. Now you're seeing Cross start to fall. What do you feel like some of the reasoning for that is, right? Is it because he's not going to test like a Neal or an Ekwonu? Is that like, or Penning, right? Penning's expected to be this athletic freak. Is it all that, or what's your thought there?
Yeah, I think for me it's the athletic testing, and I'm like, I come at it obviously from maybe a different angle as like a former coach, where I'm like, hey, this guy Charles Cross has impeccable technique. Like I think he's the most technically refined tackle in the draft right now. His 2021 season is basically perfect, right? Especially from a pass pro perspective. So it's like I understand why he's falling, but to me, you have to put him in the tier 1 group with like the 2 others you said from NC State, Ekwonu and Evan Neal from Alabama. Penning for me probably more of a tier 2 guy. I certainly understand why he's rising at the draft boards because the height, weight, size thing is pretty good, obviously. But to me, Cross, I mean the issue with Cross is like the 2020 Cross is not very good, but the 2021 Cross is legitimately a 5-star tackle prospect. So to me, he's number 1.
What are your thoughts on the criticism of like Mike Leach tackles and the history of air raid tackles going to the NFL when it's just so different, it's just visually and like what they're asked to do compared to what they're going to be asked to do in the NFL?
So this is my theory, and I have no data to back this up. But when I watched the 2020 tape, I noticed that there was classic Mike Leach O-line splits, which is very wide, right? They try to, I think the idea was back in the day, and still is for the Mike Leach teams and Hal Mummy and all these air raid guys, like we're going to spread our O-line out so that we put them all, we spread the D-line out and get them further away from the quarterback. But the issue is that you put all your individual offensive linemen on islands by themselves. And you saw that in 2020, and he was just getting beat all the time. And I think, again, I don't have the data with it, but I think they cut down the splits, and it helped a lot more in terms of being able to communicate with his guard that's next to him. And they were really awesome, I thought, in passing off stunts and stuff like that, and just helped him like be in a more kind of more natural tackle position. I think it helped.
Seth, I'll tell you what, you don't have the data for that, but at the Combine, you can ask him. You can ask Charles Cross. You're like, Charles, hey, did they cut down the splits this year? Do you think that helped? I think that would be a great question. I'd love to see you do it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm going to write this down.
I can't wait.
You put it in my Google Calendar, please.
The other thing I'd highlight, and it's like what you find out about the evaluation process, specifically about the Combine too, is so much of the evaluation is projection and what this player can be, right? Like so few people in this process bring up what Charles Cross or any player is right now. No one cares what they are right now. When you talk to people here in the draft, it's like, I care about what he could be in 3 years.
I have this issue where it's like, oh, well, like it's the potential issue, like potential. Who this guy can potentially be, blah, blah, blah. When it's like, well, no, just because, in my opinion, Cross is like already a pro-ready prospect doesn't mean that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to get guys to play in the NFL, right?
Exactly.
Like that's a good thing. And it's not to say that I have issues with the other guys. I have whatever balance issues in 2 different ways with the NC State guy and the Alabama guy, but at the same time, they're to me in the tier 1 group. And like, let's say that the Jaguars are the team that's going to take a tackle. You take one of them, I'm cool with it. Like to me, it's like don't get overconfident with like your individual evaluation of the player. Figure out who's in the tier 1 of the position you need, and go get one.
Talking to Nate Tice last night, whose dad was Mike Tice, who's an offensive line coach in the NFL for a very long time, he brought up how a lot of coaches, and Nate has been in scouting departments as well, how a lot of coaches will say, give me this player, and what I can turn him into in 3 years will be insane. And he mentioned that about his dad, about a handful of players. And I was like, what percentage of coaches, like your dad, say that same thing? He's like, all of them. Every single coach thinks they can turn a Trevor Penning, an Evan Neal, or an Ike Ekwonu into this like 10-time All-Pro. Like every single one. I think that's the balance that you have to strike with like your coaching staff and obviously your scouting department telling you what he is now, and then the coach is saying what he can be in 4 years.
When I saw Renner play flag football this summer, play quarterback, I was like, give me 15 years with Renner. And we got ourselves
and I can maybe start on a high school team. Now, let's talk about the quarterback class, though, since you're a former quarterback coach.
Current flag football quarterback.
I had one more question on the OT class, if I could.
No, you can't. Okay, no, go ahead. What do you
well, there's a lot of buzz here in Indy about Ike Ekwonu potentially being this #1 overall pick. I know we talked a lot about Charles Cross. What are in your view, what are the positives with Ike Ekwonu? What are the negatives? And you obviously see it as cross Neal Ekwonu
I think
right now.
so, yeah.
But what do you think is vaulting him up all the way to the number 1 status? And then what are your pros cons on him?
I mean, I feel like I'm kind of an ass for saying this, but I do think like his mentality, his demeanor kind of vaults him up. You put on the tape and you're excited.
You're not an ass for that. I buy into that.
Yeah, but you're excited to watch.
Fun to watch.
Ike Ekwonu's tape. Right?
Yeah.
It's great, especially against the run. I mean, as a run blocker. I think as a pass pro guy, and it's funny because I talked about balance between the two of them. I think with Evan Neal, the balance issues start maybe with his feet getting kind of tangled up a little too much. And with Ekwonu, it's more of an upper body thing where I feel like in his pass sets he'll like lean on guys too much, which is like, okay, yeah, you can get away with it when you're playing against like a Virginia defensive end or whatever, but maybe that's not going to be possible at the next level. So, but two things that are very fixable, which is why again I don't have them that far below Cross. I couldn't get enough of Cross's tape when I watched him. So yeah, to me he's just the cleanest prospect. But when you talk about height, weight, size with Neal and Ekwonu, I mean, potential, right? That's the word again.
That is.
All right, so quarterback class. You had one of my favorite tweets on this quarterback class, and it did some numbers. You said every quarterback in this class is QB3. And I think that's very accurate.
250 likes.
And I'm
24 retweets.
2,000 likes, actually. I might even go so far as to say they're QB4 in this, like, in a normal year. And so, one, who is your quarterback one in this class? Who would be the guy that you would take first, gun to your head, if you're literally forced to? And two, where would they slot in last year's class where you got Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones going all in the first round?
I think for sure you're below Fields and Lawrence, probably also Lance. And I wasn't a huge Zach Wilson guy, and Mac, I still don't know. I still don't know anything about Mac. I honestly, even after a year, I'm still not sure what's going on with him. But so
Place
like QB 3 or 4 or something like that.
Okay.
But I think that I've been gaslit by our friend who I think is going to be on your podcast, Steven Ruiz, into believing Malik Willis is QB1. Just because both of us have been burned by looking at quarterbacks who are like super athletic and maybe don't know how to quote unquote play quarterback and like
No, don't say it.
And like have issues in terms of like, hey, finding the right receiver and getting the ball to him accurately. Though I think Willis is relatively accurate. But then it's like, Steven keeps saying this to me that we might be in a post-processing world where it's like, hey, just like every other position, take the guy with height, weight, speed, and we'll figure it out later. Maybe the NFL has created an environment on offense schematically where you can just plug and play a player to a certain degree. Like, we're not trying to fit them into like under center, 7-step drop, everything's timing based, blah blah blah. Like, we can get away with guys and like a Josh Allen, where we just put him in the system for 2 years, just let him grow, and then if he figures it out, then you have this unbelievable quarterback.
The height, weight, speed conversation, too, is like always the prioritization in the first 20, 30 picks. So that's the only area of the draft where you're getting elite height, weight, speed combinations, guys that have like historical success in the NFL. So that's why when you do think about busts, right, it's always these guys that never met their potential, but you're only drafting those types in those early rounds because that's the only place you can really find them.
I wouldn't say only have success. It's the guys who end up being elite players. Like you said, you don't have too many elite players who don't have an elite physical trait in some way, shape, or form.
But not at quarterback, though.
Yeah,
that's the
thing. Like, Drew Brees is not an elite trait besides like accuracy and then processing.
Joe Burrow.
That's always been kind of like its own evaluation, but maybe that's changing, is what you're saying. So where would they fall, though, in the year prior to that? Would you put any of them ahead of Burrow, Herbert, Tua?
The Tua thing is funny to me because I feel a little weird because I think I when Tua came out and he was still like behind Hurts and everyone was like, oh, you better watch out because this guy that Alabama has is, and then we just all believed it, like this was it, he was the guy, and then he threw the touchdown in the national championship game and we said it's over, this is the number one pick. And then you know the tape wasn't as good as when I went back and watched it, you know, that offseason. I was like, you know, the tape is like okay. Yeah. I thought Mac Jones' tape was a lot better.
He graded better.
He graded better, and I running the same offense with, you know, similar surrounding talent. Like, I think he was just better. He was more accurate. He got to the right receiver quicker, and Tua stuff was just like, okay. Obviously, we can go and retroactively say that Justin Herbert was like this unbelievable quarterback at Oregon. We all missed something. I don't even believe that. I just think he got better. I think there was whatever issues there were at Oregon that caused them to not grade as well, that caused them to have all these draft analysts say he's not to say he maybe can't do something.
Yeah.
So I don't want to like retroactively go back and just say, well, he clearly was amazing. So, obviously behind Burrow was number one no matter what. So then, maybe I might have had like a Pickett in front of Herbert and Tua. It's because, again, I go back to like aesthetically, what do I look for in a quarterback? Here's a guy who can read routes over the middle of the field. With Willis, you're hoping that eventually he figures it out, because that offense is so spread and vertical, you don't get a lot of routes out of the middle of the field, which you assume you need in the NFL. But again, that goes back to my point. Like, you look at Rodgers, the past 2-3 years under LaFleur, they don't really target a lot of routes over the middle of the field. When you look at their heat maps, it's really outside the numbers. So it's like, well, I mean, I know that's Aaron Rodgers, but like, maybe we can create an offense for these guys. If Aaron Rodgers is allowed to do that, then maybe we should give that to
the pro-style offense in the NFL is changing to what your quarterback is good at.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
It's not. Hey, he has to, like you said, the 7-step drops and all that stuff. It's what can he do, and we're going to run a lot of what he can do, so he doesn't play like shit. It's pretty much what they're trying to do, and that's made it less of a developmental league. And it's like he can play right away as long as we don't ask him to do this, this, and this. And now there are some quarterbacks like Burrow and some of these guys that have this processing and this accuracy that you can win with. That you can run a very multiple, diverse offense, but it's like.
That's the crazy thing with Herbert is you put him in, they go and hire Joe Lombardi, who was coaching the Saints for all those years. You put him in the Drew Brees offense, and he's doing stuff like, I mean, I don't want to say it, but like he's kind of doing stuff like Drew Brees did. Like he's that good of a processor. So if you have the guy, go put him in that offense and then let him cook. But if you have Jalen Hurts, you can say, hey, we can make the playoffs without throwing over the middle of the field.
Yeah.
Right?
Same with Lamar Jackson. I mean,
you can just do all that stuff, which I think is so much better for the league.
I want to get to the wide receiver class. We were having a conversation last night that I thought was interesting about Drake London, and you watched two different out routes, 2 12s that you were like, this is why he's my wide receiver one. 2 plays in. I thought it was an interesting conversation though.
Well, so like, and again, it goes down to aesthetics. It's like, what do I like, or like, if I was playing receiver, I had 2 catches for 25 yards in my last fly game, but
okay.
If I was
let's see the tape.
if I was playing receiver, like what's the type of receiver I would be looking for or want to coach or whatever. And he had 2 different Oregon State game against press, inside release to run an out route against press. So he gets a hard inside release, gets up the field. Now the corner is trailing him. And what he does the first time is try to like put the brakes on and go underneath the corner, let the corner kind of run by him. And then he runs to the out. And the corner kind of grabbed him, and they got a DPI call, so it was all good. Like, they got the 15 yards or whatever. But a couple plays later, or maybe a drive later, gets pressed. He's running the same route against press, and he says, okay, well, I don't – like, yes, we got the DPI call, but I want to catch a football here. Like, I want to make a play for my team. So hard inside release, DB on the trail, and he says instead of bursting underneath, I'm going to give him a little shimmy. I'm going to stay on top of him, give him a little shimmy, head shake, and then get to the out. And I was like, okay, here's a guy who understands that there's not just one way to break off. A, his releases, he has a few different releases, and B, he has a few different break points. And like he's also like clearly really good. So like that's my type of guy.
And that conversation around Drake London, right? And we were talking about this last night, about how he separates and how he can win in different ways. It's just like levels of intricacy in draft coverage that you just don't get to because it's become so much of a height, weight, speed thing. Like how fast is he going to be? Is he a Mike Evans comp? Can he separate the next level because he's this big body receiver? But when you actually turn it on, you actually are looking at what he can do. I do think that's where like the coach's mindset versus the scout's mindset versus the media's mindset all kind of shifts.
That's a great segue into what I was going to ask, which is you hear about, I actually got asked this by Phil Perry from NBC Boston yesterday, and it kind of put me on the spot, where you hear about like his strengths and weaknesses, and you're like, wow, how is he different than N'Keal Harry coming out? Because that was N'Keal Harry's strengths and weaknesses. So how is he different than N'Keal Harry coming out?
I think their PFF receiving grade against press is like 30 points different.
Oh, wow.
It's something like N'Keal Harry, as in his last year, had like a 65 grade against press, and like London is like 90 something or 80 something. So it's like
the other thing too is if you look at Harry's production. I remember we were calling this out of tons. Like 60% of his yards came on throws that were 5 yards or fewer from the line of scrimmage. Like Drake London was winning down the field. Like
yes, I think people have to understand this, and I remember looking at the numbers after the Giants drafted Kadarius Toney last year. Like we want to believe that you can draft people who can catch under 5 yards and create first downs every time. And it's like literally like the yards after catch on throws under 5 yards is like 1.2 yards. You know what I mean? It's so small. Like if you're gonna find these like kind of smaller receivers. I mean, London's obviously a big receiver, Harry a big receiver, but when I think about those type of receivers that get drafted, Tavon Austin, you know, Calvin Austin this year, right, from Memphis, like those guys, like you have to be so good, and you really have to be you have to be Brandon Cooks, who's a real receiver who can run all sorts of routes. Because like those guys who catch short passes, like that doesn't exist.
Mike also brings up too. It's like there's only one of those players on every team. You know, you're not gonna have like 4 of those dudes. You're not gonna have 4 of those guys. You're like, yeah, we're gonna scheme him a bunch of screens this year, and we got 4 of those same types. That's a difficult role to play, and there's only one in an offense, if it even is in an offense like that.
And I think to me, physically, to go back to the Harry versus London, because London was like former basketball player. To me, he's like an off guard. Like he's like a wing who can like drive. Whereas N'Keal Harry would be like a power forward. Like he's not a guy who's going to get around you driving. He is a guy who's going to try to play right through you. And that's, to me, is the big difference that like playing right through guys doesn't exist in the NFL.
One of the guys I wanted to bring up because I think he doesn't get a lot of pub right now because of the injury is George Pickens, who when you put on the 2020 tape, it's pretty good. Okay, I get another receiver example here.
Let's go.
So they're playing against Mississippi State 2020. They're getting cover 2, kind of a version of cover 2. I think it's from a 3-high safety, like, but whatever. So he's got to get by the corner who's like squatting. It wasn't like a hard like physical corner, but he was squatting anyways. And he's running an in break at like 12 yards or something, and the corner's at 5. So what a lot of receivers do, what Seth Galena does when he plays against a press corner is like, oh, you want to press me at 5 and my route's supposed to break at 12? Guess what? I'm breaking at 6. Like the second I get any type of physical contact, mentally, physically, spiritually, any type of contact, any type of stress against me, I'm cutting that shit short. So you see him, first of all, get off the line of scrimmage, get face-to-face with the DB, use a nice move, hand use. There's 2 different types of hands, right? And we're talking with receivers. There's catching the ball hands, and there's literal hand usage to get a DB off of you. Great hands. So he does this about 6 yards, gets a DB off of him, and then instead of being lazy like me and like cutting the red out, he gets to his landmark. He explodes past the DB, gets to his landmark, and then that's a nice cut. And it's like, this is dumb. This is like stupid to like focus on these one things.
I don't think it is, though. I don't think it is.
But I see these routes. I'm like, okay, that is a receiver route. Doesn't mean like a guy like maybe, I don't know, Garrett Wilson, who maybe is not there technically as a receiver, can never get there. No. Which is why he's still going to go top 15 or whatever.
And it's not, I mentioned that, like, this is what, you don't see this in draft analysts, you don't see this so much height, weight, speed. I think that is still being discussed in these front offices. That's still being discussed with what they're doing. I think the other part of this is like, okay, I know he can do that now. I want someone who could do something insane. I want someone who could be Calvin Johnson in the NFL. And like, especially when you're focusing just on, like, the first 32 picks, right? That's where like 90% of media coverage is. But when you look at day 2 and day 3, you are picking more up of those guys who you know can like fit into an offense immediately.
Yeah, I think the biggest compliment I could pay George Pickens is that when I watch his tape, I thought he was like 215 pounds, and I go back and he's 200. Like the kind of like Jamar Chase, where it's like that's all. Like he plays a lot bigger than that.
He's got the mentality. He's a little bully at receiver, which I like. Yeah,
he literally fought a guy and got kicked out of the game too. So
he's an actual bully. Seth, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate the time. We'll have to get you back on the show more often when you come down to the States.
No, I'm good. This is my last outing here. See you guys.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tailgate. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us along on YouTube as we go. I think we're going to have another episode come out tomorrow. We're just going to continue to churn these puppies out while we're here in Indianapolis, lighting it up. Until next time, Austin Gayle, Mike Renner, Tailgate.